Johnny Carson guests who were too honest on live TV. When Johnny Carson asked a question on The Tonight Show, most celebrities stuck to the script. Charming anecdotes, practiced jokes, and shameless movie plugs. But not everyone played by Hollywood's rules. Some guests threw caution to the wind and decided brutal honesty was the best policy, even when millions were watching. The results? Pure television gold that left Carson speechless. Network executives panicking, and America completely riveted. From 1962 to 1992, The Tonight Show was America's nightly ritual. Before internet confessionals and tell-all podcasts, Carson's desk was where the nation gathered to see celebrities at their most personable. While most stars arrived with carefully rehearsed stories, a rare few used their 15 minutes with Johnny to deliver uncomfortable truths that still resonate decades later. What made these moments so powerful wasn't just what was said, but the raw authenticity behind the words. In an era of carefully controlled celebrity images, these 6 guests revealed something real, whether America was ready for it or not. Their candor created some of television's most unforgettable moments, and in some cases, changed the cultural conversation forever. So what makes a Carson interview truly shocking? It's when the carefully maintained illusion of Hollywood perfection cracks wide open, revealing the messy, complicated humans behind the glamorous facades. And nobody did this better than our first brutally honest guest.
Admired actresses and indestructible of all of them. She's had 2 Oscars, 10 nominations. Numerous awards. She recently received the Legion of Honor Medal and the César Award from France. Would you welcome, please, Miss Bette Davis.
1. Bette Davis called out Hollywood's sexism to Johnny's face. In 1983, Hollywood legend Bette Davis sat across from Johnny Carson, cigarette in hand, with no intention of delivering the usual talk show pleasantries. At 75 years old, with decades of industry battles behind her, Davis had nothing to lose and everything to say about Hollywood's treatment of women, especially aging ones. Getting old in Hollywood? You might as well be dead, especially if you're a woman, she told Carson point blank, her voice carrying that unmistakable Bette Davis intensity that had made her a star nearly 50 years earlier. The audience's nervous laughter couldn't mask the uncomfortable truth she was serving. Carson, usually quick with a comeback, seemed momentarily frozen. This wasn't the softball conversation about her latest project he was expecting. They worship youth and beauty as if it's some kind of achievement, Davis continued, taking another drag from her cigarette. I've fought for every decent role since I turned 40. The men, they become distinguished. We become past our prime. What made this moment so riveting wasn't just what Davis said, but how she said it, without a hint of self-pity, just matter-of-fact disgust at an industry she helped build, but that had little use for aging female stars. She wasn't complaining about her own career. With 2 Oscars and countless classic films, Davis had secured her legacy. She was fighting for every actress who would come after her. When I started in pictures, she continued, tapping her cigarette with perfect dramatic timing, women played women, complete, complex women, not just somebody's girlfriend or wife. Now, the industry thinks women over 40 don't exist, or worse, they don't matter. Carson attempted to lighten the mood, suggesting things had improved for women in Hollywood. Davis's famous eyes widened as she delivered a look that could cut glass. Improved? Johnny, that's like saying the Titanic improved because a few more lifeboats were added after it sank. She didn't drop names. She didn't need to. She dropped bombs about the double standard that had defined her later career, about the parts she'd lost to younger actresses, about the studio system that had both made and attempted to break her. Her criticisms weren't personal vendettas, but a systemic indictment of Hollywood's sexism and ageism decades before these terms entered the mainstream cultural vocabulary. What made Davis's honesty so remarkable was its timing. In 1983, few were having public conversations about Hollywood's treatment of women. Her willingness to use her platform to speak uncomfortable truths rather than simply promote her latest project showed the rare integrity that had defined her extraordinary career. But if you thought Bette Davis was unfiltered, wait until you see what our next guest did when the cameras started rolling.
Comedian and most inventive, and I think extremely funny. Would you welcome, please, Richard Pryor?
2. Richard Pryor talked about drugs, racism, and mental breakdowns. Richard Pryor's 1980 appearance came shortly after his near-fatal accident, where he set himself on fire while freebasing cocaine. While his publicist had surely prepared a sanitized version of events, Pryor abandoned the script entirely, turning his Carson interview into something more resembling a therapy session than entertainment. I wasn't trying to kill myself, Pryor said, his voice eerily calm as he addressed the incident directly. I was just trying to get so high I could touch God's face. Instead, I damn near met him in person. The audience, expecting Pryor's trademark comedy, instead witnessed something far more powerful. A brutally honest confession about addiction from one of America's most brilliant comedic minds. This ain't a joke, Johnny. I was destroying myself, he continued, looking Carson directly in the eyes. Cocaine isn't a recreational drug for me. It's suicide on the installment plan. Carson, visibly moved but professionally cautious, gently tried steering the conversation toward Pryor's upcoming projects. The comedian wouldn't be deterred from his impromptu confession. People ask why I would do that to myself, Pryor said, ignoring Carson's attempt to lighten the mood. Try being black in America. Try having all the money and fame in the world and still being treated like you don't belong places. Success didn't fix what was broken inside me. It just gave me better drugs to numb it. When Carson gently tried steering toward lighter territory again, Pryor refused the lifeline. He spoke candidly about racism in Hollywood, calling it a machine that chews people up and expressing how fame and wealth hadn't protected him from America's racial realities. You know what's crazier than setting yourself on fire? Pryor asked, leaning forward. Pretending everything's fine when it's not. I've been doing that my whole career, making people laugh while I'm dying inside. I'm done pretending. What made this interview so revolutionary was its raw vulnerability from a black male celebrity in 1980, openly discussing mental health struggles, addiction, and racism without concern for how it might impact his career. For viewers accustomed to celebrities glossing over scandals with rehearsed apologies, Pryor's unfiltered honesty was shocking. NBC reportedly asked for edits before the West Coast broadcast, concerned about Pryor's frank discussion of drug use. Carson, recognizing the interview's importance, pushed back against significant cuts. The result was a television moment that transcended entertainment. Pryor turned a comedy set into a therapy session, and America listened. Speaking of Hollywood's dark underbelly, our next guest didn't just hint at industry secrets, she named names and brought receipts. Three, Shelley Winters. Exposed affairs and studio sleaze. When Shelley Winters appeared on The Tonight Show in 1975, she brought more than just stories. She brought evidence and a determination to expose Hollywood's seedier side. Midway through what started as a standard interview about her latest memoir, Winters reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a worn bikini that immediately caught Carson off guard. "This," she announced, holding up the vintage swimsuit for the camera, "is what I wore when I screen tested with Ronald Reagan in 1949. Before Carson could steer the conversation back to safer territory, Winters launched into a detailed account of the casting couch culture that defined early Hollywood. "You want to know how young actresses really got parts in those days?" she asked Carson, who was visibly squirming. "Let me tell you about the producer who told me I'd get the role if I'd be nice to him. And by nice, he didn't mean bringing him cookies." The audience gasped as Winters casually dropped the names of powerful studio executives who had propositioned her throughout her early career. She recounted stories of actresses who slept with directors for roles, producers who kept special casting couches in their offices, and the institutional knowledge that aspiring actresses were expected to provide more than just acting talent. "Johnny, I was lucky," she continued, her voice hardening. "I was stubborn enough to say no and still have a career. Most girls weren't so fortunate. They either played the game or went home." Carson attempted damage control with nervous laughter, clearly concerned about the network censors and potential lawsuits. "Shelley, I think we might be getting into dangerous territory here," he cautioned. "Dangerous for whom, Johnny?" she fired back. "These men were predators in expensive suits. Everyone knew it. Everyone looked the other way. Well, I'm not looking away anymore." What made Winters' candor so shocking was that in 1975, such public accusations against powerful men simply weren't made. This was decades before the Knock Your Me Too movement, in an era when women who spoke out often faced career suicide. Winters, with her established career and multiple Oscars, had the rare freedom to speak truths others couldn't. She detailed affairs between married studio heads and desperate actresses, naming specific men who had built their Hollywood legends while exploiting young women. "This town was built on talent, yes," she acknowledged, "but also on the bodies and dignity of women who had no choice but to play along. As Carson desperately tried to steer the conversation back to her memoir, Winters pulled yet another item from her seemingly bottomless purse, a list of names. "Should I read this?" she asked mischievously. Carson nearly jumped from his chair to prevent her from sharing what appeared to be a written account of Hollywood indiscretions. The audience gasped. Carson sighed. She kept going. She didn't care about Hollywood's secrets. She was one of them. If Shelley Winters shocked with her revelations, our next guest took unfiltered commentary to an entirely new level of uncomfortable.
This is the first time we've had him on the show, or at least we've had a chance to meet. Would you welcome, please, Oliver Reed?
4. Oliver Reed drunkenly ranted about hating Hollywood. The moment Oliver Reed stumbled onto The Tonight Show set in 1987, the producers knew they were in trouble. The British actor, notorious for his drinking, was visibly intoxicated and in no mood for typical talk show banter. What followed was 7 minutes of television that network executives would rather forget, but viewers would remember forever. "You know what's wrong with Hollywood, Johnny?" Reed slurred, ignoring Carson's attempts to discuss his latest film. "It's run by cowards. Absolute cowards who wouldn't know real acting if it punched them in the face." The audience's uncomfortable laughter quickly died down as Reed continued his unhinged critique. Carson, ever the professional, attempted to salvage the interview by mentioning Reed's impressive performance in Oliver and the Three Musketeers. Reed dismissed the compliment with a wave of his hand that nearly knocked over his water glass. "Those films were decades ago," he growled. "Know why you can't mention anything recent? Because everything now is garbage. Pure garbage manufactured by accountants pretending to be artists." As the interview progressed, Reed became increasingly belligerent, his British accent thickening with each passing minute. "These directors today, they're all prostitutes," he declared, sloshing his drink dangerously close to Carson's desk. "They sell out their vision for whatever the studio wants, and the studios just want garbage that sells popcorn to idiots." Carson tried valiantly to redirect the conversation, asking about Reed's experience working with specific directors. This only provided Reed with more targets for his drunken criticism. "You mentioned Ridley Scott," Reed continued, naming the famous director. "Talented man, absolutely. But he's a slave to the system now, isn't he? They all become slaves eventually. The money's too good to turn down." What made Reed's rant so uncomfortable wasn't just his obvious intoxication, but the kernel of truth in his criticisms. Many viewers at home likely agreed with his assessment of Hollywood's declining artistic merit, even if they were embarrassed by his delivery method. "Acting is garbage unless you do it drunk or naked, preferably both," he announced with a wild laugh that sent chills through the network censors. "At least when you're drunk, you're honest. There's precious little honesty in this business." The interview ended abruptly when Reed nearly toppled a prop on set, with Carson cutting to commercial earlier than scheduled. When the show returned, Reed had been escorted off stage, with Carson making a brief diplomatic comment about artistic temperaments. Not surprisingly, Reed was never invited back. He didn't burn bridges. He exploded the set, but his drunken tirade against Hollywood commercialism has since become the stuff of late-night legend, a rare moment when the polite veneer of celebrity interviews cracked completely. While Reed's drunken tirade might seem hard to top, our next Hollywood legend managed to create equally uncomfortable television while completely sober. 5. Burt Reynolds admitted he hated certain co-stars. Burt Reynolds, at the height of his fame in 1976, was Hollywood royalty, the charming, mustachioed box office king who seemed to get along with everyone. His films grossed millions, his love life filled tabloids, and his easygoing Southern charm made him a talk show favorite, which is why his startlingly candid Carson appearance left jaws on the floor across America. What started as playful banter took a sharp turn when Carson innocently asked about Reynolds' experience working with certain co-stars. Instead of the expected diplomatic answers about how talented and wonderful everyone was, Reynolds leaned in with a mischievous yet serious look. "Some of these people you see me smiling with in photos? I'd love to punch them in the throat," Reynolds confessed, the audience laughing nervously, unsure if he was joking. The smile on his face suggested humor, but the look in his eyes told a different story. Carson, sensing dangerous territory, tried changing the subject, but Reynolds was just warming up. "I won't name names," he said, before immediately contradicting himself. "But let's just say there's a certain blonde actress who can't remember her lines and treats crew like garbage." The audience collectively gasped as they mentally ran through Reynolds' recent leading ladies. Reynolds continued, seemingly enjoying the discomfort he was creating. "There's also a director I worked with last year who's the biggest fraud in the business. Harvard education, talks about film theory all day, but couldn't compose a shot if his life depended on it. Complete hack." While Reynolds carefully avoided stating exact names, his descriptions were specific enough that industry insiders could easily identify who he was talking about. Carson, looking increasingly uncomfortable, attempted to salvage the interview by asking about Reynolds' upcoming projects. "Oh sure, I've got a new film coming out," Reynolds acknowledged before immediately returning to his Hollywood grievances. "Working with a much better director this time. Not like that last pretentious jackass who thought he was the next Orson Welles but couldn't direct Traffic." What made this confession so shocking wasn't just Reynolds' willingness to criticize colleagues, it was his cheerful demeanor while doing so. He wasn't coming across as bitter or angry, just casually honest about the phoniness he encountered in Hollywood. "You know what drives me crazy, Johnny?" he continued, ignoring Carson's attempts to change the subject. "These actors who talk about their craft and process in interviews. It's acting, not brain surgery. Learn your lines, hit your mark, try not to bump into the furniture. All this method nonsense is just an excuse to be difficult on set." As Reynolds continued dropping thinly veiled hints about difficult directors and entitled co-stars, Carson attempted to pivot, but the damage was done. The normally affable actor had just broken Hollywood's cardinal rule: never publicly criticize your colleagues. What made this confession so shocking was that Reynolds didn't seem bitter. He was almost cheerful about his disdain for these unnamed colleagues. It was funny until it was dangerously close to real. His revelations pulled back the curtain on the manufactured camaraderie of Hollywood, where stars who secretly despised each other pretended to be best friends for publicity. But even Reynolds' candor pales in comparison to our final guest, who turned shocking honesty into an art form.
Don't compare me with Miss Hemsley. She was 60 millionaires for Americans.
6. Zsa Gabor called herself a gold digger on air. When Hungarian-born socialite and actress Zsa Gabor made her 1983 appearance on The Tonight Show, she arrived dripping in diamonds and carrying a flute of champagne, despite network rules against alcohol on set. At 66, and on her 8th marriage, Gabor had cultivated a carefully crafted image of glamour and excess. But instead of defending her notorious reputation, she leaned into it with surprising candor. "I never hated any of my husbands," she told a visibly stunned Carson while casually sipping her contraband champagne. "Some of them just had more money than love." The audience erupted in shocked laughter as Carson tried to determine if Gabor was joking. She wasn't. With remarkable self-awareness, Gabor proceeded to categorize her marriages by wealth and utility rather than affection. "Marriage is too important to be left to love alone, darling," she explained to Carson. "I admit it. I married for comfort, not passion. Is that so terrible?" Carson, trying to give Gabor an opportunity to soften her admission, suggested that surely some of her marriages were based on love. Gabor's response left him speechless. "Of course there was love, Johnny," she replied with a dismissive wave of her diamond-covered hand. "I loved their houses, their jets, their bank accounts." When the audience gasped, she added with perfect comedic timing, "And occasionally, I even loved them." What made Gabor's honesty so refreshing was her complete lack of shame. While other celebrities carefully denied any materialistic motivations, Gabor embraced her reputation with a wink and a smile. When Carson asked if she was worried about public perception, she delivered the knockout line, "Diamonds last longer than applause, darling." As the interview continued, Gabor offered a surprising philosophical defense of her approach to marriage. "In America, you have this romantic notion that marriage must be about passion," she explained. "In Europe, marriage has always been a practical arrangement. I'm just honest about it, while American women pretend otherwise." She detailed how she had trained her wealthy husbands to appreciate her demands for luxury. "Men are like children," she advised the women in the audience. "They need clear rules. Mine were simple. I expect jewelry for putting up with you." The audience's shocked laughter only encouraged her further revelations. Perhaps most shocking was Gabor's candid assessment of her own appeal. "I was never the most beautiful woman in the room," she admitted, contradicting her carefully maintained image. "But I was always the most interesting. Beauty fades, but knowing how to make a man feel important and how to make him pay for the privilege, that's a skill that never grows old." Carson looked stunned. She sipped champagne. She owned it and didn't care who was watching. When honesty changed television, these 6 guests represent more than just shocking moments in television history. They mark important turning points when the carefully manufactured veneer of celebrity culture momentarily cracked, allowing viewers a glimpse of something authentic in an increasingly scripted landscape. The stakes were high. For the guests, these moments of honesty risked future career opportunities in an industry that values pleasant, marketable personalities over authenticity. For Carson, they threatened the comfortable formula that had made him a television institution. For networks, they represented dangerous unpredictability in an era when television was supposed to be safe, controlled entertainment. What's remarkable is how these moments of brutal candor stand in stark contrast to today's heavily managed celebrity appearances. Modern talk show guests arrive with pre-approved anecdotes, media training, and publicists hovering just off camera. The possibility for genuine surprise, whether uncomfortable or revelatory, has been largely engineered out of the celebrity interview process. These Carson moments remind us of a time when television still had the capacity to shock, not with carefully planned stunts, but with authentic human expression. Each of these guests, in their own way, chose truth over image management, substance over style, authenticity over career safety. The tension between authentic expression and entertainment industry expectations reached its peak during these interviews. As audiences, we couldn't look away, not just because of the scandal, but because of the rare opportunity to see famous people as they really were, flaws and all. Why these moments still matter? What's most fascinating is how these brutally honest moments, initially considered scandalous, have aged into something approaching heroism. Bette Davis's complaints about ageism and sexism now seem prophetic rather than bitter. Richard Pryor's raw discussion of addiction helped destigmatize conversations about mental health. Shelley Winter's exposés of predatory behavior preceded the hashtag #MeToo movement by decades. Even the more controversial moments, Reed's drunken rants, Reynolds' colleague bashing, Gabor's materialistic approach to marriage, offered something television rarely provided: unfiltered celebrity truth. In an era of increasingly controlled media access and crafted public images, these Carson guests remind us of a time when stars could still surprise us with their honesty, for better or worse. Johnny Carson himself deserves credit for creating an environment where such candor was possible. Unlike many modern talk shows, where questions are often pre-approved and topics restricted, Carson's Tonight Show maintained an element of spontaneity that allowed for these remarkable moments of truth. His ability to adapt when guests went off script, sometimes playing along, sometimes attempting damage control, but always maintaining professional composure, created the perfect conditions for authentic television. These moments also reflect changing standards in what was considered acceptable television content. From Davis's feminist critiques to Pryor's discussions of drug addiction to Winter's allegations of sexual harassment, many of these honest moments helped expand the boundaries of what could be discussed on American television. Issues once considered taboo became part of the national conversation precisely because celebrities were willing to address them honestly on platforms like Carson's. Perhaps most importantly, these moments remind us that celebrities are complex human beings, not the carefully constructed public personas their publicity teams work so hard to maintain. Davis's righteous anger, Pryor's struggles with addiction, Winter's experiences with harassment, Reed's disdain for Hollywood phoniness, Reynolds' frustration with difficult colleagues, and Gabor's unapologetic materialism all revealed aspects of humanity that made these stars more relatable, not less. The legacy of uncomfortable honesty. Looking back at these 6 explosive Carson interviews, it's clear they represent something we've largely lost in today's carefully managed celebrity culture. When was the last time you saw a major star truly risk their reputation with raw honesty on television? These moments remind us that behind the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, real people with real flaws and frustrations exist. Their willingness to drop their masks, even briefly, created television that wasn't just entertaining, it was authentic. In today's world of media training, publicist-approved talking points, and carefully curated social media presences, these Carson guests stand as refreshing reminders of what happens when celebrities decide, for better or worse, that honesty matters more than image. What would happen if today's celebrities approached interviews with the same unfiltered honesty as Bette Davis or Richard Pryor? Would we celebrate their authenticity, or would cancel culture claim another victim? The answer says as much about our current relationship with celebrity culture as it does about how much television has changed since Carson's era. Perhaps the most significant legacy of these honest Carson moments is how they've become more valuable with time. In an era of carefully constructed reality shows and social media personas designed to create the illusion of authenticity, these genuine moments of celebrity candor remind us what real honesty looks like: uncomfortable, unplanned, and utterly compelling. If you enjoyed this journey through some of television's most uncomfortably honest moments, hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into classic Hollywood's most revealing moments. Which of these Carson guests surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below.